Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal of Washington State. She's a member of the Judiciary Committee and ranking member of the Immigration Integrity, Security, and Enforcement Subcommittee. Congresswoman, thank you so much for taking the time. What's your reaction to this judge's decision saying the Trump administration cannot send migrants from several countries to Libya, and his warning against looking for loopholes to try to get around his order?
Well, I think it was an important decision because it was exactly a loophole that the Trump administration was trying to exploit to say we can send them to Libya under these circumstances. And this judge said, no, you cannot deport immigrants to third countries without due process.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to True Voice. I'm Andrew. And if you care about justice, democracy, and the actual meaning of the Constitution, you're in the right place. This interview dives into a recent court decision blocking the Trump administration from deporting migrants to Libya, and Jayapal breaks it down with clarity and courage. Let's watch.
And I think that this is the key thing here. Libya in particular, if you think about this, we've obviously seen it with El Salvador and CCOT, a notoriously horrific prison in El Salvador where people were being sent illegally. But now with Libya, this is a country where we don't even have an embassy there. There is kidnapping. There is a do not travel advisory because of kidnapping, because of wars between different parties. And the prison that they were planning to send people to is, again, has been described as a hellscape. That is an actual quote. And there's rampant, widespread allegations of, or actually cases of sexual abuse of prisoners, both adult and children. And so I think this is a very clear sign, once again, to the Trump administration that you cannot deport people, whether it's to Libya, whether it's to El Salvador, without going through the process and making sure that people have due process. And that's what they're going to have to do. They can't just stick people on planes and find another terrible place to deport people to.
There were developments in the case involving some of these migrants who were deported to El Salvador that you were just speaking of. We've heard that this administration, President Trump, other members of his administration, including Kristi Noem and the White House press secretary, talking about how El Salvador has control over whether those migrants could be returned because it's no longer in U.S. custody. They're not in U.S. custody. The president's own words, though, were referenced in court yesterday with Judge James Boasberg, pointing to his interview with ABC when he said that he could simply call El Salvador's president and order the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Listen.
The order from the Supreme Court stands, sir.
You came into our country illegally.
You could get him back. There's a phone on this desk.
I could.
You could pick it up, and with all the power of the presidency, you could call up the president of El Salvador and say, send him back right now.
And if he were the gentleman that you say he is, I would do that.
Could the president end up being his own worst enemy when it comes to this clash with the courts over immigration?
Yes, I think so. And I think it's laughable for him to say he can't get Kilmar Abrego Garcia back. He is the one that sent him there. We paid El Salvador millions of taxpayer dollars to jail these people who have been sent without any due process. And the reality is that, you know, this was a 9-0 Supreme Court ruling saying that Donald Trump had to facilitate the return of Mr. Abrego Garcia. The fact that he hasn't, I think, should concern every American. The fact that you have a president of the United States who is ignoring a Supreme Court unanimous decision that he has to facilitate the return of Mr. Abrego Garcia, it should disturb every single person, because if he can do that to him, he can do that to you. And I think that is what we're seeing, is the overreach on immigration. What Donald Trump promised when he was campaigning is he was somehow going to get rid of the worst, not pick up legal permanent residents, DACA recipients, even U.S. citizens and children who are in the middle of cancer treatments, and deport them. That is absolutely not what the American people want. They want him to follow the Supreme Court. They want him to follow the judges. They want due process. They want to make sure that we are not deporting all these people who have simply been living here many times with legal status.
Speaking of the Supreme Court, the Chief Supreme Court Justice, John Roberts, spoke out yesterday about the importance of an independent judiciary. Take a listen.
In our Constitution, judges and the judiciary is a co-equal branch of government, separate from the others, with the authority to interpret the Constitution as law. Its job is to obviously decide cases, but in the course of that, check the excesses of Congress or of the executive, and that does require a degree of independence.
Congresswoman, do you take that as a veiled message for the president?
I think it's a pretty clear message, and it's rare for the Supreme Court justice to do this, for the Chief Justice to do this. But he is clearly sending a message because of the threats that Donald Trump himself and his cabinet members have been sending out, right-wing conservatives who have been putting it out on Fox News, that you can just impeach a judge if you don't agree with the decision. That is not what impeachment is. There are very specific standards, obviously, for impeachment, but that is not one of them, just not agreeing. But that is what, Anna, you see with all of these immigration actions that the administration is taking. It comes down to, do you agree with him or not? That's why all these students are getting picked up, just because they don't agree with him. So it was very important what Chief Justice Roberts said.
Congresswoman Jayapal, thank you so much for taking the time with us.
First of all, deporting people to Libya, a country with no U.S. embassy, civil war, widespread human rights abuses, and literal kidnapping warnings from our own State Department. That's not just reckless, it's inhumane. And Jayapal is absolutely right. This is about due process. You can't just round people up and ship them to a war zone. That's not law enforcement. That's authoritarianism. When she pointed out that Trump ignored a unanimous Supreme Court ruling to bring back a deported migrant. Let that sink in, a 9-0 decision. Even the conservative justices agreed. But Trump just shrugged it off. That's not strength. That's lawlessness. This isn't a left or right issue. This is about whether the president follows the law. And when the judiciary, one of the 3 branches of government, tells you to act and you don't, you're spitting on the Constitution you swore to protect. And then Chief Justice John Roberts, who is not a liberal by any means, comes out and basically says, back off the courts. That's huge. Roberts doesn't usually speak out like this, but he knows the independence of the judiciary is under threat. And Jayapal called it exactly what it is, a message, a warning. Because Trump and his allies, they're floating the idea that if a judge rules against them, they can just impeach them. That's not how democracy works. That's dictatorship logic. Let me be clear. I'm a proud progressive, and I love this country enough to fight for its values. The rule of law, human dignity, checks and balances. If we let a president pick and choose which court rulings to obey, we're not a republic anymore. We're just faking it. What Jayapal said about people being deported, including permanent residents, DACA recipients, even kids in cancer treatment, that's heartbreaking. And it's not what America stands for. At least, it's not what we stand for. So if you care about this country, its laws, its people, its soul, then you better care about this case. You better care about what judges are saying. And you better care when a president tries to ignore them. Because if he can ignore the court to deport someone today, what's to stop him from ignoring the court to silence you tomorrow? Anyway, that's my take. Congresswoman Jayapal, thank you for telling the truth. Chief Justice Roberts, keep defending the court. And to everyone watching, stay loud, stay strong, and stay principled. If you like this breakdown, hit that like button, subscribe to True Voice, and leave a comment below. What do you think about the courts pushing back against Trump's immigration policies? Until next time, I'm Andrew. This is True Voice. Speak truth. Stay free.